Today I fucked up by making a suicide joke in a psychology class. Great way to start off my Monday class. I'm a college student majoring in psychology. Today we were in a Zoom call because COVID numbers in my school area started to spike up. My class is at 8 a.m., so my roommate hasn't left for class yet. We are going about our lecture and my roommate wake up and gets on his phone. My psychology teacher starts talking about dopamine in the brain. He talks about adrenaline junkies who like to skydive and bungee jump. My teacher says, I cannot begin to think what goes on in someone's mind to want to jump off a bridge with a rubber band around their waist. So I turn to my roommate and say, some people like to jump without a rubber band. Then I heard my class go silent with a few gasps and one quick chuckle. Then my teacher said, please don't make those kinds of jokes in my class, thank you. I froze and quickly muted myself. My roommate died laughing at me. I felt so embarrassed. Roommate is still laughing at me. Edit. I thought I was muted. I wasn't. Too long did not read. Made a joke about bungee jumpers without the bungee in a Zoom call. I guess that joke landed flat. A broken rubber brought you into this world and a broken rubber is going to take you out of it. As someone who has struggled with depression and suicidal thoughts, I approve of this joke. Dark humor is pretty prevalent in the psych unit. Edit because I can't leave a spelling mistake alone. Been there, done that. At least the person laughed. It definitely wasn't appropriate to say in front of a class, but as someone who has been grappling with intense suicidal ideations for years, it sounds like a joke I would make in private to someone else who understood. During a history class on WW2, the teacher was discussing the nuclear bombings and the impacts on the morale of the nation and said, "Can you imagine how they felt?" I just muttered to myself, but slightly louder than intended, "Hot." My cousin, who was also in the class and sitting next to me, started dying laughing. You would think a psychology professor would be more open to a discussion on why people do in fact jump without a rubber band. I was in a statistics class once and the teacher was going on about how you couldn't make a truly random dot plot. I said sure, you can just hand a pencil to Michelle J. Fox and have him draw a straight line. Most of the class gasped like it was the worst thing they had ever heard. The teacher in full math mode goes, "Yeah, that would probably work." Then he caught on to what I had said and, "Oh, that's horrible, I thought it was funny." Today I fucked up by giving a blowjob that caused the guy's parents to divorce. This story ends with me scared for my life, 300 miles from home, playing possum with a massive dick in my mouth. But before we get there, I need to set the scene for you. I'm saying this didn't happen today not just to be honest, but to provide some context. 2006 was an odd time to be a gay 18-year-old in the Midwest. On the one hand, the same liberal-ish political and cultural climate that created whatever emo was and that eventually lodged Obama in the White House made it a relatively decent time to come out. And come out I did, drunk and vomiting on April Fool's Day at my female prom date's house. On the other hand, however, even though not one but 3 young men from my graduating class would eventually proposition me in later years, being openly gay was perceived as risky enough that I was the only one drunkenly brave enough to come out before graduation. So, it was a time when I could feel comfortable enough to come out, but also be totally isolated in doing so. I used to joke that I had an anti-gay force field. I simply never encountered other gay men. But I heard legend that others were out there somewhere. Sometimes their mythical voices even reached me on the internet. One of those voices belonged to another young man in a similar suburb a whole state away. I had been so lonely for so long that I had begun to internalize my loneliness as a fault. Perhaps there were other gay men around me, but I was just so ugly or unlikable that they didn't reveal themselves to me. But he showed me otherwise. He thought I was funny and handsome and smart. After spending so many years effectively writing myself off as a romantic non-entity, years when my body was telling me sex and love were the most important things in life, I can't overstate how intoxicating his attention was. It sounds comical now, but during those years, I wasn't sure that I would ever really meet another gay man, let alone one I found attractive. Obviously, despite the distance, I had to go see him. MapQuest, which will have an interesting second appearance in this story, told me he was some 4 hours away. I didn't care. I had a sense of adventure and, more importantly, 5 years of loveless, sexless adolescent energy festering under my virgin skin. I, who had never driven more than 45 minutes from home, would make the interstate trip to see my online lover. The date was chosen soon. His parents planned to be out of town for a whole weekend. Following the long journey during which I got lost twice and came within inches of crashing into another driver, I arrived, safe but nervous, at his house. He waylaid me in the driveway, inexplicably wearing shades, to tell me there had been a slight change of plans. His parents decided at the last minute to stay home. But it was fine. Not knowing he was gay, they had no real reason to question his having a male friend over. We went to his room, and even though I had several pictures of him saved at the heart of a maze of misleadingly named file folders on our shared family PC at home, when he took off his shades, I felt like I was seeing him for the first time. He was tall and in shape, albeit rather skinny. A romance novel would probably describe at length his wealth of red, ringlets of hair. The shape and apparent softness of his lips gave me impure thoughts. I can hardly summon the feeling now, but I know at the time that I was staggered or made dizzy by the reality of finally, after so many years of thinking it might never happen, being in the presence of another gay man who found me attractive and whom I found attractive. It was like my sex drive and my fight or flight response were activated at the same time. I felt like I wanted to climb the walls and find a defensive perch to hiss from, yet I also wanted to claw my way through his t-shirt and slobber all over him. But first there was the awkwardness of it all to work through. Seeing how each other moved, hearing each other's voices, getting the cogs of conversation creaking into motion. And the stakes felt so high. I had driven 4 hours for this. We went to see a movie, walked around town, and by that time we had eased up enough. We were giving each other such naked glances of lust that it felt cliché. His seemingly harmless suggestion that we head back to his place sounded practically obscene. The next moments remained sharper in my mind than things I did just yesterday. Even though I never set foot back in that room ever again, I remember the bead curtain closing off his closet. I remember recognizing his bed coverings from one of my mother's department store catalogs, and I remember noticing that his door had no lock. We sat together on his bed, talking about this and that, while he put on his favorite Incubus album. I did not tell him that Incubus was a band my friends liked to make fun of. He gave me his seashell bracelet to take back with me, just in case, and on this point he was prescient. We never saw each other again. I was amazed at how he became more attractive to me over time, and how I could feel my body orienting itself toward him, not just in the vulgar obvious way, but as a magnetic feeling in my chest. Before long he began kissing me and I felt newly alive. Until then I had been exiled from the world of affection and longing and love, and now not only was I newly admitted, but what I was experiencing felt all the more precious for how long I waited and how far I journeyed. When he pulled down my shorts to start filleting me, I tried to enjoy it, but I was a little too nervous, a little too new to it all. I enjoyed it enough, but couldn't lose myself to it, so instead I drew him up next to me and positioned myself to return the favor. He had subtly indicated, during our conversations online, that he was well endowed. When I say, however, that his cock remains in the top 3 most impressive I've ever encountered, you need to understand that that statement comes from how do I put it delicately? A friendly guy. Even my mother calls me a slut. I couldn't even fit my index finger and thumb around it, but I persevered. I drove 4 hours for that cock. I was going to suck it right. If the little moans and thrusts I was provoking from him were any indication, then I was doing a decent enough job. We were getting somewhere. In the building heat of that moment his father walked in to offer us dinner. I had been kneeling before the bed, but out of the corner of my eye I saw him walk in, see what was happening, run out, and then run back in, seemingly realizing that he was the parent and that he should do something about the situation. Terrified, I froze at first, cock in mouth, and then switched out playing possum for playing ostrich. I buried my head in the bed comforter, which I knew where to buy. I couldn't stop thinking that the father must have seen his son's mammoth cock. Was he proud? Was he threatened by it? "Get the fuck out of my house," the father shouted at me. I didn't know him at all. I thought he might actually kill me. "Dad, please, stop," called the son. "I still love you." Strange sentence to hear a man roar in boiling anger. But this is going to take some getting used to. "Just get out of my room. You need to leave. Now," the father reminded me. "I can't," I said. "I don't have directions." In the minutes that followed, the mother was brought abreast of the situation. When I was a kid, there was respect, was her opinion, and I was ushered into the computer room. The red-faced father glared at me while, in the background, the family's slow and incredibly loud printer choked out 4 hours worth of MapQuest directions back home, line by line, it seemed. Once I had them in hand, I thought I was free to go, but the mother, whose son's monstercock was no doubt still moist with my spit, decided to sit me down to annotate the directions step by step. This intersection is tricky. There was no question of ever seeing him again. Even if we might sneak to see each other or meet halfway, the situation had been stressful enough to wipe any desire from my mind. Some weeks later, he told me that that night had actually been the last straw for his parents' marriage. Tensions had been building between them for years, and after the incident, the house dynamic tended to be he and his mother against his father. As the weeks passed, we spoke less and less. I kept his seashell bracelet for a long time. I was surprised and comforted by how long it carried his scent. I am quite sure I would still recognize it. Too long did not read. I gave an out-of-state blowjob to a guy when I was a teenager. His dad walked in and freaked the fuck out enough that in the aftermath the parents decided to get a divorce. I never saw the guy again. The mother decided to sit me down to annotate the directions step by step. This intersection is tricky. This is actually quite sweet. She got past the initial shock and wanted to help out the polite boy her son was enamored with. I found the dad's response, "I still love you, but this will take some getting used to," strangely wholesome given the situation. Pretty sure all the guys are just looking at their thumb and index finger RN. The real today I fucked up is not hitting reverse directions and printing out both ways before leaving. Oh, the MapQuest life. Side note. While I find most of the sex-related today I fucked up content to be completely beyond cringy, on a good day, I appreciated that monstercock, although central to the story, didn't seem to take away from everything else, and thus enjoyed the read. You're an amazing writer. It was like my sex drive and my fight or flight response were activated at the same time. Bro, that's just your dick taking a screenshot. Ignoring the whole elephant blowjob for a second, you really perfectly described what it's like to be gay and rural. Bravo. That was one heck of a ride. No pun intended. The story is very engaging and to be honest, I am slightly envious of your adventures, not the BJ part but the courage or perhaps a little bit of madness involved in deciding to drive 4 hours to meet an online stranger. I was an introverted teen and couldn't even drive till my early 20s. Welp, I don't particularly see how it could be that big of a fuck up, and now you have a hilarious story to tell. Also, the shell bracelet part might as well be straight out of a romance novel. I hope you have many more, but safe lol, adventures ahead. Take care. Today I fucked up by finally going into my dad's closet. Growing up, my father was incredibly strict about the closet in his room. Under no circumstances were we allowed in there, ever. My dad would always get tense when me or my siblings ever wandered in his room. He was always quick to kick us out. Once when I was 12 he caught me trying to open it. He keeps it locked, and I got grounded for a long time. The closet has always been an inside joke in the family. We always joke that my dad is building a time machine in there or hiding bodies. This has been going on since I was 10 or so. I'm 22 now and I recently learned how to pick locks. I was home from college visiting my parents for the weekend. I don't live with them, just visiting. And I knew the closet lock is nothing special, so I decided to crack it open and take a peek. It was a Saturday, which is my parents' date night, and I knew I would be alone, so I decided I was gonna find out what was in that damn closet. I waited 30 minutes after they left and I went in. It was incredibly, but I never thought I'd actually find anything bad. But man, the legend behind the door felt as old as I was. My hands were shaking, but despite that it didn't take me very long to get the door open. It was a bit bigger than I was expecting, and to my left and right the walls had 2 huge shelves. The left shelf was loaded with a ton of Unklebens rice bags, the ones you can pick up at Walmart. The top edges of each one was cut off and had this white see-through like tape on the holes. Each row had different letters on them, like GT or BIDK what they mean. IDK what the bags were for, and that's not what caught my eye. What surprised me was the right shelf, filled with containers of fucking shrooms, dude. So many mushrooms. I knew immediately what they were. Why else would someone be growing mushrooms in a closet, right? Some of the containers only had tiny little ones, but a few were growing like an entire forest of them. Others were just containers of dirt with white fuzz covering the dirt. But holy crap, there were a ton of mushrooms. Hundreds of them. I knew his secret probably wasn't a good one, but I was never expecting to find an indoor shroom greenhouse. I locked the closet and immediately went to bed. My dad is Mormon and is always lecturing me about the dangers of caffeine and alcohol addiction, so to find out that he is growing shrooms and probably selling them is a huge surprise. Not sure what I am gonna tell my siblings. Edit. I won't say anything to my siblings, I'll just take this to my grave. IK shrooms aren't a bad drug, it's not like he's Walter White making meth poisoning the community or anything. Too long did not read. After 10 years of wondering what was in my dad's locked closet, I broke in and found basically a giant drug lab for shrooms. I mean, if it were me, I'd just keep my mouth shut, and not say anything to my siblings. Your dad's secrets are his own and you should probably let him have his privacy. If he wanted you to know, then he would talk to you about it. Dad's growing his own supply. Pretty sure the GT are golden teachers. Surprised your dad has never offered or told you about them. That specific grow method was made popular here on Reddit. If you don't want your old man getting even more mad, you should remove this before you get caught, dumbass. Don't expect privacy from your parents if you violate theirs. Just saying. Bruh, I was expecting that he was hiding some BDSM equipment, lol. Oh, snap. The toothpaste has left the building. Daddy follows the Unclub and sub here. I'm 47 and have a son in his 20s. We've openly discussed mushrooms and mushroom cultivation for quite a few years now. Within reason, I've always been the dad who talked honestly with my son about everything, including my own drug intake. Honesty has definitely created a closer bond between us. All that said, don't tell your siblings shit. Everyone deserves their own autonomy, and you're kind of the asshole for not allowing your father that small bit of privacy. Today I fucked up by accidentally pranking an undercover cop. This happened about 15 years ago, but I remember it like yesterday. So long time ago, when I was a kid, I would stay with my dad on the weekends, and my best friend lived 3 houses down the street from me, so we always hung out every weekend and got ourselves into trouble often. One day we were very bored, and apparently we were annoying my dad while he was doing something in the backyard, and said his usual saying of, "Go play in traffic." Obviously he didn't mean to actually play in traffic, but it gave me a good idea that I learned from my cousins recently, which was have someone stand on each side of the road and pretend to pull a rope when a car is coming down the road. It makes drivers think that you're actually holding a rope, and they slow down and honk, and it was a fun time. So me and my buddy do this on our road for a solid 15 minutes and do it to about 5 cars. We lived on a country road, so not much traffic. Now incoming the fuck up. We see a car coming down the road and get in position to do it again, and as soon as the car is close enough we pretend to pull the rope, then immediately see the red and blue sirens turn from the inside of the windshield. So my friend and I immediately just freeze in shock as a cop gets out of his car and right away just starting yelling at us. This yelling goes on for around 5 minutes about how we could have caused an accident or gotten killed, and wants to talk to my parents. So we get my dad and he talks to the cop for a while, and we got scolded even more until the cop finally left the house. Luckily, my dad, having a sense of humor, couldn't help but to laugh afterwards and called us idiots and told us not to play in traffic anymore. After that he never did tell us to go play in traffic anymore. Too long did not read. My friend and I did a fake rope pulling prank to an undercover cop and got yelled at afterwards. This is hilarious, but did the drivers just assume the ropes were invisible? Actually did this as a kid, but instead of imaginary ropes, we would put entire branches and block the road, therefore forcing the driver to get out and move the branch. He leaves, we put the branch back and wait for the next car, and so on. God, we were assholes. It's definitely unmarked. Undercover is when a cop, lives his whole life, for months or years, as a member of a drug ring or whatever in an attempt to get to the criminals who run the operation. Douchebags driving around in regular-looking cars so they can give surprise speeding tickets aren't nearly that cool. Also grew up in a small town with nothing to do, so we did this a handful of times, but with our own little spin on it. After pulling the rope, we would lean over and act like we tied it to something and run away. So many people would get out of their car and actually wave their hands through it to see if there was actually a rope. I do not condone these activities, but it was pretty funny at the time. Especially since we didn't have TV or internet. We used to saran wrap across streets at night near my friend's place that had a treehouse we could see it from. Just a reminder to all millennials that 15 years ago was 2006. The kids in my community used to tie fishing wire across the street onto parallel trees so that it would scare cars, bikers, and pedestrians. I wish they had done this instead, because honestly the snap when it broke was truly terrifying. Kids in my hangout would get cops to chase them down an alley and between 2 garbage cans on opposite sides of the alley with a long wire between them. Zoom. Bang. Bang.